Virtual Boy is a console that for many people likely needs no introduction. For a long time when people thought Nintendo and failure, it was likely the first thing to come to mind. However, of course in recent years with the Wii U, it's debatable what some people may think is just Nintendo's biggest blunder. Having a 3D display that only showed different shades of red, many people who used it claimed to have headaches or other injuries after playing. It didn't help that despite being advertised as a portable console, the only way it could be played was using a stand and sitting it on a flat table. This often resulted in the need to uncomfortably reach in order to see what was going on. The Virtual Boy was released in North America on August 14th, 1995, and discontinued on March 2nd, 1996, less than 1 year after it came out. On my console, you can see that there's actually a price sticker for $29.99 showing that at one point they were really just trying to sell these things off. Even more interestingly is a sticker on the side, which relates to the warranty of the console, and the date that's marked on it as the purchase date is April 4th, 1997. So that goes to show that it was actually bought over a year after the console was discontinued, and they must have just been sitting around for quite some time. Otherwise, the console's box tells tales of free batteries and other crazy things that I believe are definitely worth taking a look at. So in this video, I thought it would be fun to examine both the Virtual Boy's box and even having a look at what came inside. So let's get to it. So, by zooming in here, we can really get an idea of just what the Virtual Boy is all about. And of course, the first thing that needs to be noted is kind of the red and blue thing that is going on here on the box. Now, this is used, of course, on the console itself, but also on all of the Virtual Boy's games, and also all of its accessories have this red and blue thing going on. And I'm not so sure why that is. I guess maybe in the 90s, when people thought 3D, the first thing that they thought was of like the 3D glasses used in movies and such, where you get one red lens and one blue lens, although of course that is not how the Virtual Boy works. It works by projecting a slightly different image into each eye, which gives a kind of a 3D depth effect. However, there's of course no kind of red and blue shenanigans going on, so it's kind of misleading in a way. And I'm not so sure why they decided to go with that. This isn't something that they had in Japan. There was no kind of red and blue theming that's exclusive to North America. So it's kind of funny, and it'd be definitely interesting to see who made that kind of misleading decision when going for the packaging. However, in the bottom corner here, we have a coupon for discounted batteries. I almost said free batteries, but no, not lucky enough for that. You just get $1 off on one Duracell AA battery pack, and you will realize, of course, if you play this thing with the battery pack, that it eats batteries like a monster. But thankfully there is an AC adapter that you can get use to get around that, of course, but that takes away from the portability of it. You won't be able to play it on any park benches or anything like I'm sure many people were eager to. In the bottom corner we get an eye advisory. It is only for players 7 years and older. Not sure what would happen if someone under that played it. Maybe they'll just like implode. Guess we'll never know. Has digital stereo sound, a 32-bit processor, and high-resolution 3D graphics. So it's not high definition, but rather high resolution. So you can decide if you agree with that or not. And of course the sticker, which I mentioned earlier. And the other thing to note on the front is, of course, that every single Virtual Boy, all like 700,000 of them which were sold, included Mario Tennis in North America. Actually, yeah, it was not a pack-in that was in Japan. Only in North America was that included with the console. But let's flip this around to the back and have a look what's on there. So, looking at the back of the console, there's one thing that is definitely missing from here that I think every single other console has, and that is pictures of gameplay. There is not one picture of any kind of game going on here, but if you think of any other console in existence pretty much, of course the NES all the way up to anything that we have today, the number one thing that they want to show off is how their games look, but not anywhere on this thing is there any kind of demonstration of how games look. So it's almost like they were kind of embarrassed, to admit it. They didn't want you to know that, what the games looked like going in, because they're of course not, the virtual reality that many people probably think when they think of virtual reality. Obviously not, up to the standards that we have today. So I guess they really were kind of ashamed of what they had here by not trying to display any of that. Of course, what we get is a kind of rundown of many of the games which came out for the Virtual Boy, of all 14 of them. This is like, almost half right here. But the really interesting one is, of course, Wario Cruise, which was later renamed to Virtual Boy Wario Land, but I guess, all the boxes just, you know, they came out before the game came out, and for some reason the name was changed. Wario Cruise is just literally like the weirdest name ever, so I'm not really sure what they were really going for in that, considering that, you know, the game has nothing to do with cruising at all. He spends the entire game in an underground, you know, labyrinth, so not too sure what they were thinking there, but, you know, that is, you know, Virtual Boy Wario Land, of course. Mario Tennis, you know, being advertised there, and we, of course, get the rundown of just what the Virtual Boy is all about. You get the double grip controller. The controller is actually really neat. We'll, of course, look at that when we look at what comes inside the box. Double control pads, you know, it was kind of ahead of its time in that. It's not like, you know, 2 control sticks, but rather 2 control pads. Can't think of many other consoles that have that. Dramatic 3D effects, dramatic widescreen game vision, digital stereo speakers, a sturdy stand, which isn't so true, the stand's actually a little bit flimsy, and a 32-bit processor, and it also advertises the AC adapter pack, which you will absolutely want if you do not want to be spending $1 billion on batteries. Also, warning, 6 AA batteries not included, and there's just some, you know, information for calling in down there, and also in the bottom corner for, again, 4 players, 7 years and older. So that kind of, you know, that's the rundown of the box. It's a really bizarre box, again, because it doesn't show any pictures of gameplay like you would expect from any other video game console box. It really comes across as they knew that they weren't impressed with it, and again, there's the sticker I showed earlier on in the video. And yeah, it's the Virtual Boy, it's about what you expect, so hopefully, you know, many people probably haven't seen too much of the outside of the box, and I definitely think you're going to enjoy seeing the inside of it as well, so let us move on to that. So here we are with the insides of the box themselves. However, before we actually get to, you know, talking about all that, there's actually quite a few interesting things there. There is one thing kind of hitting us in the face, and that is this gigantic piece of cardboard which says, get 6 free Duracell batteries. So yeah, we're being hit with an advertisement for Duracell again, and I'm not sure how much they paid for this advertising partnership, but they probably ended up losing out back in the day. However, this is just a really, you know, bizarre piece of cardboard, and I can imagine that not many of them probably exist anymore, because most of them were probably used as like frisbees or as fire starters or something like that, but, you know, who would probably think to actually hang on to this? But it's definitely really neat, and I'm super happy that my box includes it, just because I think it's so bizarre, but that's the kind of stuff I love to own and, you know, show to people. Inside the box, of course, we have the manuals and such, which we will certainly be having a look through, but this is something that definitely needs to be talked about first and foremost. If you watched my Pokemon Stadium Battle Set Nintendo 64 unboxing, you will most certainly remember that I commented on how it came in a nice block of styrofoam, as most consoles did back in the day. However, this one, not so much. This is more of like an egg carton, you know, papery material, and this thing is awful. It just feels flimsy, and, you know, like it could disintegrate at any moment. There are a few consoles back in the day that did cheap out and go for this kind of, you know, material to use inside of the box, and I just hate it. It is just so unfortunate, and it's very rare to find kind of this thing, you know, in good condition, just because it is so flimsy and like soggy, and ugh, it is just awful. But, you know, putting that aside, let us look at actually what is in here. And the main thing is, of course, the Virtual Boy's head or main unit itself has a very famous design. Many people are probably, you know, very familiar with it, but may not know the details on exactly, you know, where everything is located. On the bottom here, we of course have volume and headphones. We have the controller jack and the link cable jack. Oh wait, that was never actually released, so it's basically the useless jack. Also, cartridges go in here. I mean, yeah, such a shame. I mean, it didn't even survive long enough to have a link cable released. What a crazy console. This is, of course, where you put your eyes, and you can kind of see a reflection of me in there. These are your focus kind of slider, and just, you know, to kind of adjust the image. I've never had much luck getting them to work if, like, the image isn't good. I find that messing with these things doesn't usually improve my gaming experience overall, but I guess, you know, that's just par for the course with the Virtual Boy. You're going to get a headache, and you're going to like it. One of my favorite details on the Virtual Boy head is actually these kind of rubber Nintendo symbols on the side. I guess, like, I don't know, like, unless you were walking around with it, it's not like it would really be used for, like, protection. So, I mean, I guess if it fell over and it landed on that rubber thing, it would protect it a little bit, but overall, you know, it's just it's a weird addition that's neat, but probably not super practical. And of course, the, you know, the very famous back where it just says Virtual Boy. So, neat console. Just, you know, the execution on the inside, unfortunately, obviously a little bit lacking. Also, this is just a kind of, you know, rubber, no, not rather foam, not rubber, kind of eye protector, or rather, visor there, and it can be removed and washed, in case someone comes over and they get all sweaty while they're playing Virtual Boy Wario Land. You can just wash that off and not have to, deal with that yourself later on. Moving on to the next thing in here, we have the controller, and I've always thought that this controller is very reminiscent of the GameCube controller, which of course came out, years later, where you have these two kind of grips coming down. Not too many, other Nintendo controllers had that. Of course, the 64 kind of had the 3, but this, if you put it beside a GameCube controller, you can definitely see the resemblance. Weirdly enough, you get, two D-pads, which is not something that you really had on too many controllers. You get Start, Select, B, and A. And this thing in the middle here is actually the way that the Virtual Boy is powered on and off. So this is the on position, and that is the off position, because of course, you cannot play the Virtual Boy without a controller anyway. So you're always going to have it plugged in whenever you want to play it. So yeah, rather than being on the console itself, you actually turn it on with that switch. And here's the plug, which is actually very reminiscent almost of an NES controller plug, except it's more rectangle than that, and it only has, kind of 6 pins instead of 7. That's rather neat. And on the back, we actually have this kind of, massive gap here, along with some L and R buttons, which actually feel pretty cool to press. So overall, I think the Virtual Boy controller is a pretty neat controller. We'll put this to the side for 1 second, and look at what is hiding under there, which is the Virtual Boy's battery pack, where if you open it up, that is where your 6 AA batteries go. And then you can slide it onto the back of the controller, which I'm going to do very carefully. Just like that. And it clicks in, and there you go. So that is how you put batteries into the Virtual Boy. Many people probably, don't think about them being in the controller themselves, and probably think about them, maybe being more inside the actual console. But the controller is rather important. You're not doing anything without the ability to turn on and off your game with the controller. So that is that. And then the other thing that I moved to the side here is the pack-in game, of course, Mario Tennis. Unfortunately, no box or anything, just like Pokemon Stadium with the Pokemon Stadium battle set. Every Virtual Boy game came with a neat little kind of black cover that went down the bottom. And I've always really liked the design of Virtual Boy cartridges. They're neat because, unlike most, which kind of have like recessed pins, if you think like a Game Boy cartridge or an NES cartridge or such, these ones, it's not the actual pins themselves, they're hidden in there. But it's just neat kind of how it sticks out. It gives it a different look than almost any other Nintendo cartridge of the day, and you even get a little bit of a Virtual Boy going on up there. And the way that it actually goes into the console is the opposite of many consoles of the day, where the label would be facing outwards. The label here actually faces inwards, just like that. So you should be looking at kind of where it says Virtual Boy, and I guess this kind of acts as like a grip, so that you can remove your games. So that's how you put a game into the Virtual Boy. And then the last thing in here is the stand. And the stand, again, it says it's like sturdy on the box, but it's actually, it's not super great. It doesn't feel very good when the Virtual Boy is sitting on this thing, and it's not fun having to, try and level it so that it's, at the proper height when you're playing it, probably with phone books or something like that. But you're probably going to have to crank your neck when using this thing, and it is just not fun to use at all. So the stand, and also has a tendency to crack right here as well. Especially, if you pull the legs apart too far, which is why I don't really want to do that, because the stand is still in nice condition. But you will find many that have that crack in that position, so be sure to check if you are buying a Virtual Boy. And with everything removed, we can see just what this kind of thing looks like, and you can see, very much how it is just kind of like an egg carton. This one is actually, in comparatively good condition, considering that many of them probably are more beat up and not in as good of shape as this thing. So, with all of that out of the way, what I want to do now is, of course, have a look at the manuals and such that the Virtual Boy came with, because I think there's some interesting things to talk about in there. And that brings us to this bag right here, which contains 3 pieces of documentation, and we are going to be looking through all 3 of them. One of them is, of course, the big Virtual Boy manual. One of them is kind of this fold-out precaution booklet, and one of them is the instruction manual for the included game Mario's Tennis. So it's not Mario Tennis, it's his possessive tennis. I guess Mario Tennis is actually the name of the Nintendo 64 one. I'm super surprised that they didn't slap a 64 on the end of that name, to avoid confusion. But I guess they figured that no one would actually remember that the Virtual Boy existed a day after it came out, so they weren't too worried about that. Otherwise, this is actually just a very typical instruction manual, but there are certainly a couple things in it that I want to point out, which I think are rather interesting. The first of those is the automatic pause function. So every single Virtual Boy game, usually after the title screen, included a menu which would come up asking you if you wanted to turn on automatic pause. And if turned on, every 10 minutes while playing the game, a screen would come up reminding you to take a break. Like, that's insane. Can you imagine if every 10 minutes when you were playing a game, you just, took a break? For how long do they even expect you to take a break for? Like 10 minutes? So in every hour, you're actually only playing a game, for 30 minutes? Can you imagine what streams would look like if people took a break while playing a game every 10 minutes? And then it even notes that, it won't pause during a shot. Like, I think that the fact that the Virtual Boy had to include a feature like this, it's just a sign that there were problems from the very beginning. Like, if you have to, kind of push people to take a break like that, to not do whatever, like start throwing up or something, like that's kind of a sign that maybe you're not on the right track. The Virtual Boy also includes a low battery indicator inside its games, because other Nintendo portables like the Game Boy Advance would have a green light which turned red when it was about to run out, or even older models of the Game Boy would have a red light which would start to dim when the batteries were running out. But the Virtual Boy, obviously, even if it had a light on the outside, you wouldn't be able to see it while your head is shoved inside the visor. But since it doesn't, you just kind of get an indicator on the screen that will tell you to change the batteries, which is something you're definitely going to be seeing very often when it comes to the Virtual Boy. Otherwise, the next interesting thing to note is it tells you all about playing the game. But the funny thing, I think, is it points out, all the different characters in the game, like all of our favorites, like Toad, Koopa, and of course the always popular Donkey Kong Jr. I think it's so funny that older Mario sports games included Donkey Kong Jr. instead of Donkey Kong. I guess that's so that they could have the excuse of him being, close in size to the other cast, like the rest of the Super Mario cast. But I like how with kind of the Nintendo 64 games that went out the window, and it always just became regular Donkey Kong, with Donkey Kong Jr. actually being an unlockable character in Mario Tennis on the Nintendo 64. But I think it's kind of funny though how Donkey Kong Jr. got such a back seat after being the original Donkey Kong character in Super Mario Kart and even Mario's Tennis. I mean, of course, no one actually remembers that Mario's Tennis exists, so I guess there is no harm done. And also at the back, you even get a place to write all your high scores, and don't forget about Mario's Tennis School. You get like a whole, 3 sentences. If only school was really that simple. Otherwise, again, just a very typical book, and of course it has that whole red-blue effect going on that I was talking about earlier. Item number 2 is this Precaution Manual, and it looks very similar to like something that you see in many Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games, just a black and white printed manual, and this goes over some of the things you should remember to do while playing the game. And you get English on the front, and the English actually takes up both halves of the front, while on the back you actually get each half is a different language. Also on the front you get this interesting illustration of the Virtual Boy. Well, since the back has 2 languages on it, you don't actually get that, so the people who don't speak English are totally missing out. But otherwise, this is all stuff that appears in the manual as well, and this is kind of, because the way it folds out, hard to show on camera, so we will just, skip right to the big manual, which is this thing right here. Looks, as you would expect, it has the exact same image that's been, going on throughout this entire review. And then the back is just totally black, like a whole black ink cartridge used just to making that, because, why not? The Virtual Boy was all about wasting money, so why stop there? Now here's a common theme that we're going to see throughout the Virtual Boy's manual: red. Red warnings, red cautions. You better get used to them when you are reading through this thing right here. So, about the Virtual Boy, and here's what we're really looking at. So you have cautions, where cautions you about the incorrect use of the Virtual Boy that may result in personal injury or damage to the Virtual Boy. And then you have warnings, which warn you about incorrect use of the Virtual Boy that could result in serious personal injury. So let's take note of all the times that you may die while using the Virtual Boy. That's exactly, that's what's going to get people to want to buy our hardware, and Nintendo thought. So, I mean, just tells you about a lot of the things I've already mentioned: how to set up the stand, how to put the battery pack on. There's the red that we know and love. Failure to follow the following instructions could cause the batteries to make popping sounds and leak battery acid, resulting in personal injury. Yeah, so that would kind of suck. I mean, that's kind of a general, I guess, thing where, don't follow, don't do any of these things or your batteries might implode all over you. But still, the way that they put it doesn't really make me want to play the Virtual Boy. The lesson here is, I guess, to use the adapter, the AC adapter. You'll save money anyway. Choking hazard, not for children under 3. I mean, they shouldn't be playing with the Virtual Boy anyway if it's for people 7 and older, but, I guess 3-year-olds wouldn't know how to read that, so you never know what 3-year-old's going to be playing the Virtual Boy. The other cool thing to note is that it actually thinks that you can take the battery cover and place it on top of the Virtual Boy when you're not playing a game. I don't think that anybody actually realizes this, and there's probably not a single person in the world who has ever actually done it, but I guess no one questions what these two kind of bumps on top of the console are for, but the instruction manual clearly states that the actual purpose for that is to place your connection protector on top of while you're playing the game. And I mean, it fits on there perfectly. It doesn't even fall off if you tip the console upside down. So I have to admit that that's really neat, and it's a really kind of bizarre addition that no one would probably ever actually think of. But now you can, amaze all your friends by telling them something that they probably never knew about the Virtual Boy. Like, that's just so bizarre. I've never seen another console that had a place to put, put the protector while you're playing the game. Those things are just, that sacred that you gotta, make a specific place to put them. Otherwise, always make sure that the power switch is off, and, just basically, important things that you should probably do otherwise. But here's a warning, so we might die if we don't follow this one. It is important that you properly adjust the angle and height of the Virtual Boy before its use, or else it may cause all sorts of injuries. But see, this is such an ideal situation. Like, I have never found a desk that I can place the Virtual Boy on and it feels perfect. I always have to either crank my neck upwards or downwards. It never feels comfortable. And even this guy, like, if he plays that for more than like 15 minutes, I don't care how perfect it is, it's gonna start to hurt. So this, overall, Virtual Boy is a world of pain, and in the case of a couple of the games like Wario Land, it's worth it. But otherwise, do not hurt yourself over what the Virtual Boy has to offer. Don't unplug it and such while it's on. But here's a good one. The Virtual Boy IPD and focus adjustments must be made each time that a game is played. Like, there is no way that anyone took the time every single time they turned on the Virtual Boy to look at this screen which shows up when the Virtual Boy is turned on and adjust it. Like, there is just no way. Playing a video game should not be, a 10-hour process that you need to go through in order to actually get to the game, and then you have to take 10-minute breaks while playing the game. Ugh, Virtual Boy, couldn't you do anything right? Caution, take frequent breaks, while playing, like, ugh. Take frequent breaks while making this video, or you may forget how to speak. No, do not use the Virtual Boy in a car, or otherwise, or other moving vehicle. Like, how can you call it portable if you're claiming, literally, in the instruction manual, that it cannot be played in a moving vehicle? Warning! Failure to follow these instructions can result in permanent hearing loss. Now, that's a really bizarre warning, considering it's not actually Virtual Boy specific, but, I mean, it's good advice, too, not to turn your headphone volume up too loud. But just, there's just so much red. Reading this does not make you feel very confident while playing the Virtual Boy. And otherwise, we get 17 kind of tips that we can use to try and, solve hardware problems, or just, make sure that we don't end up with them in the first place. I'm not going to read through them all, but hopefully I'm going through them slow enough that if you pause the video, you can have a whale of a time reading all about how not to play with your Virtual Boy as if it were a football, because that would probably totally, scratch the paint. Otherwise, tells you about how to remove the eye protector. Thankfully, there are no warnings on this page and only cautions, so, you're not going to accidentally die while cleaning the eye protector. That's the one thing that the Virtual Boy has going for it. No chance of death while cleaning it. Otherwise, if you have a screen that looks like it is a map from an old RPG, you should probably stop using it and, call Nintendo. I also like this one. Problem, you feel dizzy, nauseated, or your eyes hurt while playing it. Stop playing, make sure that the Virtual Boy is set up properly, stop playing, and if you're unable to solve this problem, call Nintendo's hotline and tell them about how you're about to throw up because you've been playing the Virtual Boy. I wonder how many times that happened. It's like, Nintendo counselor, how can I help you? I'm playing the Virtual Boy. And what is this video even? And the last thing that people do not know, or many people probably do not know, is that there's actually a button combination that you can enter on the title screen of your Virtual Boy games that brings up this kind of alignment test. Now, I mean, that's all fine and dandy, but the problem is that if your alignment is not good, the only solution is then to send it to Nintendo. So you would think that, okay, well, maybe there's a way to correct it myself from this kind of menu, but nope. Gotta send it into Nintendo. And I wonder how many times people actually did send their Virtual Boys in for repair. I mean, of course, not that many of them were sold, but I bet there were probably still a lot of people who either it didn't work, or they, it was just working so poorly that they didn't even realize it was working correctly. And the last page here is a Virtual Boy parts list. Now, I think that something like this is kind of cool. It's neat to see back in the day, if you are missing a part for your Virtual Boy, just how much you could have paid to get a replacement. You know, things like the instruction manual are free, AC adapter, overall if you get the 2 pieces costs you about $20. A Virtual Boy controller is actually only about $16, man, that was the day when, you know, controllers weren't $60, $70, those sure were good times. You can also buy the XXX Game Pack instruction booklet, but just don't tell your parents, because they won't want to know you're reading the instruction booklet. That's totally, you know, legit. And then of course, you know, the Virtual Boy link cable, there's no price for those because you're supposed to call them and, you know, get the price, but since it was never released, I guess we'll just never know how much they may have charged for it. So with that said, that is the Virtual Boy unboxed and exposed. It's such a bizarre console, and just, you know, reading through that manual, seeing all the warnings, ugh, it doesn't blame me that more people weren't just, you know, screaming at their parents to get it for them for their birthday. It's just a bizarre thing, and it's very clear when you look into it without even actually playing any of the games why it was not super successful. Hopefully you enjoyed though, seeing this look at the outside of the box, which is interesting in itself, but also a lot of the crazy shenanigans going on the inside. And let me know what you think. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next time when we look at more retro gaming things. So thanks, and see you later.